Hello, today we're going to talk about the three ingredients that I think make up a good worker, a good teammate, a good employee. Welcome back to Motivational IQ, the podcast where we open your brain and figure out what makes things resonate or drag us down. What motivates us and why? I'm Andy Thompson. I'm a business coach who loves helping other people enjoy the work that they do. Started decades ago when I realized almost everybody that I knew hated the work that they were rewarded to do. As a young guy, I grew up short of money, would do anything to earn money, learned how to work, loved working, and figured out what made me tick, but also how it burned out in the end. It's been a few weeks since I recorded a podcast because I've gone through some very difficult scenarios in the last few weeks that have made me very, very busy and kind of go through the cycle myself. Got some really good advice, and that was don't talk from the wound, talk from the scar. And so I made sure that I was in a position to talk about what I've learned and become through this experience instead of like all the damage that was done. I've learned a lot. In fact, I've learned to put the very things that I'm talking about in this podcast to the test. Every podcast, I seek to give you something. Today, that's going to be two things. One, the three ingredients that make up a good employee, a good teammate, a good team member, a good worker. I think this universally applies. I've hired and trained hundreds of people throughout my career, interviewed thousands, and there's three things that I finally determined after all that analysis and history and experience that make up a good employee. If they have these three things, I can work with them. If they don't, I'm actually not interested. I'm also going to talk about something that I've developed called the productivity pyramid and how that applies to motivational intelligence. Okay, let's get going. Let's start with the productivity pyramid. Just imagine a pyramid, and it represents people. Everybody lives at kind of a layer in this pyramid. The very, very bottom underneath the pyramid are people that are lazy. They choose not to be engaged, not to be interested, not to put in the effort. Nobody really wants to work with those folks. It's hard. We don't know what to do. We want to help them, but also we don't want to take away their agency. But at the same time, it's like, if you're not going to do anything, we have this kind of question of what do we do with people who don't want to participate? The next level up from being lazy, just think of like stages in this pyramid, is people who keep busy. Now, interestingly enough, we kind of immediately think, oh, that's really good. But the reality is we also don't want to hire those folks because they're not focusing their effort on what matters. They're just keeping busy. And think about it. The only difference between being lazy and being busy is effort. And it's not structured effort. It's got a little tiny bit of focus on it. But the reality is we don't really want to work with people who are lazy or who just keep busy. The next one up is where we start to get into real value. And that's people who are productive, right? The difference between someone who stays busy and who's productive is they have focus, they have purpose, and their effort has a meaning, right? They have an outcome, a goal. They're structured to get somewhere. So this is productive people. And most of the workforce in the world is people who are productive. Yes, there's plenty of people who are lazy. We all go through these stages at different times. So sometimes we're lazy. Sometimes it just is a time to kind of restructure your energy. And sometimes we just keep busy. But understanding each of these phases as it applies to motivation is what we want to talk about. So being productive is that golden kind of zone, but there's one even better, and that is the next level up. And it requires deliberate, focused intent and decision making, which goes directly with the motivational process. And that is people who prioritize productivity. What matters? Productivity 1 versus 2 versus 3. And then they go about doing the better thing instead of just the good thing. Now, I reserve a little piece at the top of the pyramid for people who are, and I use the word leaders, but it's really not a good fit. It's more like influencers, people who can recognize and work with anybody where they are in the spectrum. I say spectrum, it's any stage of that pyramid, that productivity pyramid. If you can understand and see where someone is and help them kind of progress, that you're at the top of that pyramid, but we all go through this process. The first thing I want you to do with this pyramid in your mind is recognize where you are at different facets of your life. Work, relationship with boss, relationship with significant other, relationship with children, neighbors, financial advisor, physical health, mental health, emotional health. You might go, oh, yeah, I'm kind of keeping busy with my relationship with my significant other, or I'm being lazy when it comes to physical health, or, right? Go through that and recognize where you are and then start to see the difference. Again, my goal is to have you to see the whole picture and where you are in the process and what it takes to advance to the next level. So let's just go through it really fast again. Very bottom, lazy. The difference between lazy and the next level, keeping busy, is a little bit of effort. The next level up from that is being productive, and that's focused, aligned effort with a goal in mind. The next one up from that is prioritizes productivity, and that is people who have a deliberate, focused intent on accomplishing a goal over another goal. They look at the entire chessboard and know which part matters more than another part, and they know how to make sacrifices and choices. And then at the very, very top is those influencers or leaders that work with people, like help them know where they are. Okay. It's important to know that if you take this pyramid and turn it on its side, it is essentially identical to the conscious competency process. Those people who don't know what they don't know, but choose not to engage and learn are the lazy. And those who give a half effort to engage and learn, but don't really try to overcome what they don't know, that's people who stay busy. People who progress through that first stage where the painful awareness and they start to really ignite their brains and learn and really apply things and figure things out, that's productivity. But the next one up, where you start making choices, mastering choices, and moving to the purpose driven activities, that's the do know what you do know and then don't know what you do know because it's become habit, right? You're an autopilot champion. That's the latter stage where you're prioritizing productivity and then becoming an influencer. Think about this. Anybody who's a master in their field, anybody, doctor, farmer, parent, YouTuber, flautist, if you ask them about how to do what they're doing, they'll tell you everything. They have gone past the protective nature that exists in those first phases because they've learned that why matters the most. But if you go to people along that process, they have different reactions. And this is how the team formation process and individual sharing of kind of competencies and capabilities also applies to that conscious competency model. Again, what matters most, and you go back to episode 2 for core foundations, what you need in the beginning of the stages up until you begin to be productive is progress. Things that you can do that you can feel and see and learn. And then as you kind of escalate out of that, you don't need just progress, but the focus becomes choices. That's productivity into prioritizing productivity. And then as you escalate out of that, it becomes why or purpose. Remember that at all stages of that process, you need all three ingredients, but you need more of the one that I described that's more important along the stages. Okay. So turn that pyramid on its side. You get the conscious competency model, you get the motivational IQ spectrum, and you can navigate. So if you go home and your dog is irritable, right? You can kind of navigate what does this mean for our relationship? What do I need to do? Or your significant other or your neighbor. Let's say your neighbor's parked in your garage or in your yard or in your driveway, probably better than yard or driveway or garage. And oil's leaking out of the car. What do? First of all, you cycle through the process. And if you know how you kind of navigate, you can see where they are. This is motivational IQ. You sense where they are, help them. You know where you are. You remain buoyant to keep moving toward the solution that's beneficial. And that's kind of how that works. Okay. Now, this also applies to the three ingredients that I think make up a good employee. I started out in IT. I did a lot of project management and leadership of project management, and then I got into management of organizations, strategy and organizational change. Did a lot of project rescue, and that's a situation where you go into a team or a situation where they just they don't have any hope of achieving the project. I remember I went into one that had been working for 2 years to implement a particular piece of software and just organizational challenges and technical challenges. And they asked me to solve it in 2 months. And I did. And that's a story for another time. But as I went through these rescue situations, I learned that there's a common theme in what are the possibilities of causing the problems, but also a common theme in what are the solutions. And I formed this into a format of the three things that I think make up a good employee, good team member, good worker. Okay, here are the three things. Number one, hard work. This does not mean long hours. It means the ability to focus and be productive during the time you're supposed to. If you're hourly, it's by the hour. If it's salary and by objective, it's by the objective, right? It's what is your role? You have to know that. That's the first steps in the conscious competency process, and then do it. So hard work is maintain productivity during the time you're supposed to. Means you have to know what you're supposed to and know what productivity is. So hard work. Number two, second ingredient, willingness to learn. You can call that humility or teachability, but really you have to be willing to learn. Now, I cut my teeth in the IT industry, where if you are not willing to learn, you get left behind in a matter of days. And with AI and other technologies kind of advancing so fast, you have to be willing to really lean into it and learn. You have to have a mindset that says, I don't have all the answers. Ironically, I've never met anyone who likes working with a know-it-all. Never. So if you want to be a good team member, employee, worker, be willing to learn. Find ways to show that. Find ways to communicate that in your emails, messages, text, phone conversations, words, in your demeanor, and show that, and it will work. All right. So first one, hard work, be productive. Two, be willing to learn, be humble, be teachable. And number three is seek excellence. It doesn't help if you want to learn if you're not going after a target of excellence. If you just don't care about the results, it doesn't matter what you're learning. It doesn't matter what you're doing for productivity. So it all ties together. But those three things together, I don't care what your skill set is. I want to work with you. I want you on the team, because that's the kind of person has a track record of putting in the effort, has a track record of being willing to learn, has a track record of seeking excellence. That's good. You can see that in all sorts of aspects in your resume. You can see that in communications. You can see it in the way they answer questions. So when it boils down to it, that's the three things that I look for in an individual. The way I interview is two-phase. So when I interview someone, I ask a question like, where do you see yourself in your career, in your future? And they usually give me an answer that's fairly resume safe. Leadership. I want to be influencing. I want to help others. And then I'll ask a question, say, tell me what you're doing as you do that. Tell me why you want to be in that role. Give me just some insights into, how you see yourself influencing or training or helping or assisting, and dig in deeper. An easier example would be, what do you like to do in your free time? If someone says, I like to read, I'll say, oh, share with me a couple of books that you've read. It catches them if they're being lazy on their answers, but when they're not, I have a really good conversation. So dig deep, double down, and it helps you expose, well, or reveal really people who have put in the effort, are focused, and willing to learn. I just got back from a trip out of the country where I had to learn a lot of things, and I was thrust into the situation of I didn't know what I didn't know and had to go through some new processes. I had to reapply my own motivational processes to myself, recognize where I was from a motivational buoyancy perspective, and learn and grow. I also got to spend some time with my sister and her husband and hear about them, what they're going through, and I recognize it in them as well. I want to talk about that more in the next episode. So, just a reminder, two things that I want to talk about today: the productivity pyramid. Where are you in whatever facet of your life? Are you just keeping busy? Are you lazy? Keeping busy? Productive? Prioritizing productivity, which is really the apex of capability, or are you helping others as they progress along, navigate that up and down process? Life thrusts us up and down the pyramid and the conscious competency and motivational spectrum. So it's kind of normal. It's not our goal to stay out of survive mode. It's our goal to get back to where we function best. So productivity pyramid. And the second thing is the three attributes of a good employee: hardworking, humble, teachable, and seeks excellence. These things directly correlate to how, why, and what, which makes up motivation. As always, thank you for listening. I'm Andy Thompson. I'm a business coach. I love helping other people. Reach out. I'd love to talk to you and see how I can help and how I apply this to your life, or just learn from you. As always, if you appreciate this and enjoy it, share it. Tell a friend. And thank you for listening, and stay engaged.